Really honored to stand with so many veterans from Congress and also to stand with the heroes and heroines of 9/11. And our first speaker will be from the fire officers, Richie Alls. I want to thank everybody for coming. They got on a bus this morning at 5 o'clock to be here with us, and we hope we'll have the votes to pass this and get it passed and right away after their meetings today. So Richie, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Carolyn. Your lips to God's ears. I'm also representing the citizens for the extension of the James Droger Act. If I said that I'm happy to be here, I'd be lying. And the good sisters of charity taught me better than that. The only redeeming value is that I get to stand alongside elected representatives from across the country in bipartisan support of this life and death legislation. Some of those legislators are also military veterans. And we're also joined by other military veterans and leaders of military veteran organizations. And of course, the men and women in blue, America's domestic heroes. Members of the International Association of Firefighters, all of these firefighters, a union of 340,000 strong. We're joined also, we have IFF First District Vice Presidents Bill Ramaka and Danny Todd. I have IFF Local 94 President Steve Cassidy, Vice President Jimmy Slevin, Local 854 Sergeant at Arms George Farinacci. We have the presidents and the members of our state organizations from Wisconsin, from Texas, from Tennessee, from Indiana, Virginia, and of course, New York. We also are joined by Mr. Joe Zadroga, the father of the man whose name is on the legislation as the first confirmed 9/11 hero who died of his illnesses for his heroics and on September 11th. 5 years ago, we were forced to compromise. And that was because after many, many years, we were desperate and we were out of time. And also, we felt that in 5 years' time, that renewal would be a no-brainer. But apparently, no-brainer does not exist in Washington. So what we have is two competing bills, one which acknowledges the need for permanent funding, which has the majority of members of Congress and the Senate in support. And then we have a less efficient bill, a 5-year bill, which is simply a disgrace that is backed by a funding mechanism that is doomed to fail. So the ask today is quite simple. I'm calling upon the leadership of both houses. So yes, that means that I am talking to newly elected Speaker Paul Ryan. I am speaking to Senator Mitch McConnell, who has constituents in the coal mining industry in Kentucky that are protected by permanent funding of a black lung bill. So I know that Senator McConnell understands the need for permanent funding for 9/11 heroes. These leaders need to call upon the chairpersons of the two committees that hold the destiny of this legislation in the palm of their hands, the Energy and Commerce Committee and the Judiciary Committee, to stop their procedural nonsense and release the bill for a floor vote. We are willing to accept the consequences of that. And knowing the numbers of congressmen and senators that are supporting the bill, I'll take my chances with that. We're feeling pretty good. Because we cannot keep bringing our sick and dying heroes down here. It's embarrassing, it's humiliating, and it's life-threatening. The American people want this legislation. The American people demand this legislation. I think the time for talk is over. But I'm going to ask my colleagues, what do you say? Is the time for talk over?
Yes!
I think the time for action is now. But let me ask my colleagues, is the time for action now?
Yes!
So let's show the world how America takes care of its heroes. Let's pass the damn legislation and let's pass it now so that our healthy members can go back to work defending America and our sick members can go home to their families and tend to their wounds. It's that simple. Now I would like to introduce a good friend and a longtime 9/11 advocate, Mr. John Feel of the Feel Good Foundation.
Thank you, Rich.
Hey.
65 bipartisan senators. Where are the other 35? Where are those other 35 people in the Senate that aren't on this bill? Where's Senator Cruz and Paul and Rubio who want to be our next president? You cannot pick and choose which Americans you want to help. 248 co-sponsors in the House. Where are the other 170 congressmen and women on this bill? You cannot pick and choose which people you want to help in your district. These men and women that serve Congress and the Senate, we've heard it before, have a moral obligation. But where is everybody? We've done our work. We've traveled here countless times. Today's trip 19 in 2015. We're tired. We're beaten. We're worn out. And Richie's right. No more talk, action. You know, I never wore the uniform as a firefighter or a police officer. But I wore the uniform for my nation. And we were taught you never leave anybody behind, man or woman. I'm honored and humbled that IAVA is joining us today. I'm proud that certain members of Congress and the Senate served their countries before they became members of the Congress and the Senate. But everybody here today has to go back and implore their colleagues. And simple words, one line, one sentence. Why are you not on this bill? Well, we don't like to pay for. Really? When Congress or the Senate wants money, they find money. This is not about money. This is about ideologies. This is about two political groups putting their differences before human life. And that's unacceptable. I can never apologize for the comments I've made in the past or the actions I took to get this far. I don't work for Congress or the Senate. I work for the men behind me and the women. I don't care who we leave pissed off at us because we're talking about human life. I am proud and I am humbled to introduce the Chief Policy Director for the IAVA, Matt Miller.
Thank you. Thank you very much. On behalf of the IAVA founder Paul Rieckhoff and 400,000 members of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, I'm proud to stand here today with members of Congress, first responders, veteran service organizations, and supporters. No affront to you guys today, but we shouldn't have to be standing here. September 11th defined a lasting call to service for many Americans. However, for both post-9/11 generation veterans and 9/11 first responders, the consequences of their service extended far beyond that day. As a veteran and a DoD civilian who served in Guantanamo Bay, Iraq, Afghanistan, I am disheartened I have to stand here today and beg, hat in hand, for Congress to support this simple bill. Unfortunately, Congress allowed the act to expire in October of 2015, turning their backs on 9/11 families, first responders, and veterans who answered the call to serve. This is not a New York-specific issue, as my accent should tell you. All 50 states, U.S. territories, and the District of Columbia sent over 72,000 first responders in the days after 9/11. We're here to urge every single lawmaker on Capitol Hill to support continuing funding of the Zadroga Act. The measure signed in 2011 through a bipartisan effort and supported by IAVA offers medical treatment and compensation for first responders who became ill due to their time at working around Ground Zero and the Pentagon. Today, the veteran community is bringing a message to the House on Capitol Hill who think it's too expensive to support these efforts, and those who answered the call of 9/11 and the weeks and months after. Stand with our veterans or get run over by us. We're joined by senators and House members who have co-sponsored the bill. The wind is at our backs, and those who are standing in the way of passage of this legislation should remember that veterans are united behind this, and we vote. Our country cannot afford to turn our backs on 9/11 families, first responders, and veterans who have answered the call of the service. Since that day, 2.8 million veterans have served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and their service continues today, both at home and abroad. And we call on Congress to pass this legislation in as expeditious manner as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Mark?
Senator Mark Kirk.
Here, I'll grab my remarks here. I would say that after the Paris attack, we have now been reminded of our own 9/11, and we want to make sure that we honor those who came to the pile and we care for them had health care problems. I have 173 volunteers who are sick in Illinois from their work on the pile, and we want to make sure we care for them, just like Art Noonan, whose picture's over here, who is right now battling cancer. And we've got to say that as a Republican senator, I will say Gillibrand is right and Schumer is right on this, that we cannot let this act expire, and make sure we take care of the 170 Americans who are in Illinois who are suffering from their maladies from working on the pile. I would say that let's not let this expire. You've got support across the board. As the only member of the Senate who served in Afghanistan as a member of IAVA, I strongly back this. Make sure that this is bipartisan and that we have the complete backing of this. I would say now we have 313 members of Congress who are backing us. Right now, 313 members of Congress are right on this issue. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
We are encouraged and heartened that the veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan are supporting the veterans of the War on Terror. They're standing firmly with them, that they should not be left behind, they should be taken care of. We are privileged that a number of veterans in Congress are standing with our veterans of 9/11 and the War on Terror. We will first hear from Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. She's Hawaii's 2nd District. She was twice deployed in combat. She's a combat veteran, currently a major in the Hawaii Army National Guard. We're so proud of you, Tulsi, and so glad that you're standing with us. Thank you.
Whether you were on the front lines in New York on that fateful day or 4,000 miles away in Hawaii, every single one of us remembers how 9/11 impacted us all, how it impacted a generation. The thousands of 9/11 first responders who put their lives on the line for total strangers, for a city and a country in chaos that day, are true heroes, something that we must remember. Today we've got over 72,000 responders and survivors who are living all across the United States, 45% of which have at least one health condition caused by 9/11, including cancer, caused by 9/11 toxins, asthma, and other chronic illnesses. Over 2/3 are suffering from more than one condition. Just as groups like IAVA fights to make sure that our country keeps its promise to our veterans, it's long overdue that we all stand together and fight to make sure our country keeps its promise to these heroes who served us so bravely on that day, and make sure that they get the care and the support that they deserve and that they've earned. I'm proud to stand here with these first responders, with my colleagues and with fellow veterans, to make sure we raise their voices for them and continue this fight. Thank you.
Congressman Chris Gibson from New York's 19th District. Over the course of his 24-year Army career, Chris rose to the rank of colonel and was deployed 7 times. He's standing with us, and Chris, we thank you. We're so proud of you. Chris Gibson.
Thank you.
We're gathered here in the capital of the greatest nation in the history of mankind. And we know that freedom is not free. That we thank dearly our servicemen and women and our first responders. We stand with them. In fact, the people that we're fighting for today were really the first wounded warriors of this war. We must stand with them. Permanently reauthorize the droga. Thank you.
Congress,
Wait.
you don't want to do him?
Our next speaker is Senator Chuck Schumer, who, as you know, has led this fight from the very beginning and has made such a difference in bringing together a bipartisan coalition in the U.S. Senate. Senator Chuck Schumer.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand, but you have led the fight, and we've been great supporters, and thank you, and we thank our colleagues who have led it in the House, Carolyn and Jerry, and Peter. Bottom line, we're not going to take a half-baked bill. Now, if Phil said it, he'd use a different word after half. But we're going to take we need the full bill. We need the House to step up to the plate. We can get everything we need done in the Senate. We need the House to step up to the plate. We're asking every one of our colleagues in the House, get this done. No more delay, no more half-baked. They said, well, 5 years. I was part of the compromise with Kirsten when we did it 5 years, and that's because it was new. And they said, oh, it won't work. Oh, it'll be full of fraud. No fraud, it works perfectly. It's time to do the full permanent bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, for your leadership. And now from another one of our veterans, Ted Lieu, California's 33rd, a veteran of the United States Air Force, currently serving as Lieutenant Colonel in the Air Force Reserves. Thank you for your support and leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you for standing with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for working for our heroes.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. I'm so honored to be here, and what I learned from serving active duty in the U.S. Air Force is that America is an exceptional country because we take care of our own. When we have folks, our first responders or those who serve in the military, and go and serve our country and then are harmed or suffer injuries because of it, we take care of them. And that's why we need to reauthorize their full bill. And it's a message not just to our citizens, but to the entire world. Do we remember those who are heroes on 9/11, or do we forget about them? We need to remember them. We need to reauthorize this bill now. So honored here to stand in support of it.
Thank you so much. Another veteran, Congressman Lee Zeldin from New York's 1st Congressional District. He spent 4 years in the military, and Lee is here with us, and thank you so much. He was deployed to Iraq in 2006, and active duty in the U.S. Army. So proud of you. Where's Lee? Great, thank you.
Well, first off, I'd like to thank my colleagues in the House, and most specifically Carolyn Maloney, Peter King, who have, just this morning, Peter pulled me aside and was talking about what we need to do to make sure this gets done. So just for it to be all over their radar and working so hard really means a lot to my constituents who are impacted. Our senators who are here, one of my constituents, John Field, who we're very proud of back home for all of his efforts, the IAVA, and Richie as well. American exceptionalism is being on display, getting tested here, and it's one that I promised to John Field, even though he said he may be starting to feel beaten at the end of the day, he will be victorious. Everyone here will be victorious because it is the right thing to do. American exceptionalism were those first responders who went up those towers even though they were getting orders to come down. American exceptionalism is in the hours and the days and the weeks and the months after the attacks that they went to that pile to do everything that they can to help with the response. American exceptionalism are individuals like Tulsi Gabbard and Chris Gibson and Ted Lieu, and our other veterans over here, Ruben Gallego, who went overseas to help protect our freedoms and liberties. American exceptionalism is that those who stand in these halls behind us do the right thing and get a permanent extension done and nothing less. We will not accept anything less than a permanent extension. And thank you all again for our men and women who are behind us, who would risk everything to demonstrate American exceptionalism at home and abroad.
Another example of American exceptionalism is Congressman Ruben Gallego, Arizona's 7th District, a Marine Corps veteran who served in Iraq with the well-known combat unit Lima 325. Ruben, is Ruben here? Great. Thank you for your service, your leadership, for supporting us.
So us Marines, infantrymen, we believe ourselves to be the 911 for America, especially for overseas combat. So to come here and talk about this really confuses me. We should not be having this press conference. The reason men and women join the military, the reason a lot of us will kick in doors and do some really crazy things for our country is because we have an understanding with our government and with the people of the United States that if something happens to me, that I will be taken care of and my family will be taken care of. This is why men and women continue to join the military. This is why men and women will continue to join our firefighters, our police officers. But if we can't honestly tell them that us as Americans, that we took care of you when you took care of us in one of the most delicate, one of the most difficult, and one of the most emotional times in our country, how can we honestly say that to the next recruit that comes in to try to join the firefighters or the police? We can't. And lastly, we find money all the time. We find money for tax cuts. We find money for incentives. How can we not find money for this? It's absolutely ridiculous. Thank you.
We cannot pass this bill without strong bipartisan support. And leading the charge on the Republican side has been Congressman Peter King, who has worked with great conviction and commitment and effectively over 60 Republican co-sponsors. Thank you, Peter King. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn, Jerry, Chris Gibson, Dan Donovan, of course, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Schumer, all the members of Congress are here. But especially let me thank the veterans who are here today, those men and women who put their lives on the line and now are stepping forward to do what has to be done here at home. And of course, the firefighters, the police officers, especially the firefighters union who's here today, for always answering the call. Listen, I lost over 150 people, friends, neighbors, constituents on 9/11, and I thought that was it. I thought that was bad enough. That was horrible. But since then, in the years since, to meet people suffering the worst type of illnesses, debilitating illnesses, blood disorders, brain tumors, the rarest form of cancers, should not be allowed in our country, that these people not get the medical help, that they get the care they have to have, they deserve. They fought for it, they deserve it, we owe it to them. And as far as any time limit on the bill, the fact is we've had 5 years. This bill has been administered without fraud. It's provided great service. Unfortunately, the illnesses are not going to stop. And many of these illnesses don't get detected until 5 years have gone by, 10 years have gone by, 15 years have gone by. And also those who are being cared for, we're going to stop caring for them in 5 years. The fact is this bill has to be extended, and there's no reason not to. It should be a truly bipartisan effort. We will do all we can on our side of the aisle, and the fact is that it is up to our side of the aisle to get it done. I pledge to you, I will continue to work with everyone to make sure we get it done. But thank you for being here today. You're doing God's work. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you. One of the lead sponsors in the House, Jerry Nadler, who has been incredibly successful and effective in getting us where we are today, and we're going to help push us over the finish line. Thank you, Jerry, for your leadership. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Carolyn. Every time I come to a 9/11 Zadroga Bill rally, which I've been doing for 14 years now, I always mention President Lincoln's call in his second inaugural address for the United States that it is our duty to care for him who shall have borne the battle and for his widow and his orphan. That's part of what makes the United States what we are. And all the veterans know that we also don't leave wounded on the battlefield. If we do not reauthorize this bill permanently and properly funded, we won't leave wounded on the battlefield. We'll kick them out of the hospitals. Let's kick the veterans, the disabled, the sick, who got sick and disabled on our behalf. Let's kick them out of the hospitals. let's leave their families without funds when they go. That's not the United States. That should not be this Congress. These are people who rushed into the buildings when others were rushing out, who worked for days and weeks and months to help our survivors, and we cannot abandon them. Anything less than the full Zadroga bill is a shame. As has been said before, this program has been working with no fraud and perfectly well. We have other programs like it. We have a permanent program for survivors of black lung disease. We have a permanent program for people who were injured as a result of radiation from nuclear tests in the atmosphere before we understood what was going on. Why should this not be permanent? The money is there. The money is easily there. You have all kinds of presidential candidates pledging trillion-dollar tax cuts. We don't need $1 trillion. We have plenty of money. This is simply a question, is the United States going to be truthful to itself? Are we going to be honest? And are we going to tell our future veterans? You know, we just had a huge terrorist attack in Paris. We have all kinds of people saying we should send the troops in, etc. Are we going to tell those troops, if you get wounded, you're on your own? This country must do better. We must pass the Zadroga bill with no compromises.
Frank Pallone from the great state of New Jersey has helped us secure an important hearing in the committee that he is ranking, and the Commerce Committee. And Frank, thank you for really helping us usher it through the first time, have a successful hearing. He's working hard to pass it. Thank you, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. I want to thank Carolyn and Jerry, the senators, and all our members that are here today. But this idea of having the veterans, not only veteran members of Congress, but veterans in general, in solidarity here today, I think is so important, because this really is a war. I mean, that's what 9/11 was all about. It was a war against the United States. And in fact, I see some of the solidarity being expressed with France, and I saw the president of France saying that France is at war. It's an international war. It's not even just a national war, that the terrorists are fighting against all of us who believe in freedom and democracy. But I just wanted to go back to why we can't have this interim, 5-year bill. I know Senator Schumer mentioned some of the things, but I just wanted to say this. We have a clinic in New Jersey for 9/11 survivors, first responders, and every time I go there, it's very clear to me that this is something that we're going to have to deal with for many years, okay? The research that's done to look at new diseases and new diagnosis, a new way to deal with the patients, the fact that there are members, there are doctors and healthcare professionals that are involved on a long-term basis, all that becomes sacrificed if you just do a 5-year or short-term reauthorization. They need to know, the people that are doing the research, the professionals are hired, they need to know that this is something that we're into for the long run. Otherwise, the professionals won't stay, the research won't be done if they think that it's a short-term phenomena. And it is not a short-term phenomena, as has been mentioned over and over again. The other thing that bothers me is that, all these people that come here and express support for this legislation being permanent, are we going to be able to do this 5 years or 10 years from now? It's going to be hard to continue to come back here every 5 years and do this. It's another reason, just politically, why it's important that it be done permanently. There are a lot of sound reasons why this type of program needs to have a permanent reauthorization and not be done from year to year. And that's what we really are stressing here today, and I will continue to stress to my colleagues on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dan Donovan. The day he was sworn into Congress, he came up to me and said, "Carolyn, I want to get on that bill." So he's constantly been with us, standing with us, and working with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Thank you, Carolyn, Jerry, Pete, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Schumer, and the rest of my colleagues here today. I want to especially thank our veterans and first responders for joining us in the fight for what is right. I've said it before and I'll say it again. On the merits of this case, we have the winning argument. After the attacks against America on September 11th of 2001, selfless heroes rushed towards the death and destruction. Many will pay for their heroism for the rest of their lives. Many have already paid with their lives. More than 33,000 Americans have documented illnesses directly related to their work at Ground Zero. Since 9/11, more than 200 firefighters and police officers have already passed away. In my district alone, more than 6,700 heroes rely on the Zadroga Act for medical care. Time doesn't erase our moral imperative to cover their medical expenses. It's an extension of the cost of the attacks. America's heroes deserve a permanent reauthorization of the Zadroga Act and nothing less. And let me remind you how this diseases that people, the heroes, are contracting doesn't have a time frame. Diane DiGiacomo last year contracted cancer from her heroism on September 11, 2001. 13 years later, she now weighs 60 pounds after spending weeks. Know what she was doing? Recovering people's pets. She now has said that it's a terrible thing to go to your government for help and they turn your back on you. Let's not turn our back on Diane DiGiacomo or the rest of our heroes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you. I want to thank particularly the veterans and my colleagues in Congress that are veterans, and really also the heroes and heroism. Heroes and heroines. 9/11 marked the rise of terrorism as a tool of choice for terrorists. 9/11 was a time when men and women of great courage responded to save the lives of others. Many of them are standing with us today. They were there for us when we needed them. We need to be there for them. We lost almost 3,000 people on 9/11, but thousands more lost their health, their ability to make a living. And for those who bear these scars of their service, for those who lost their ability to work, their health, their very lives, serving all of us, we must do the right thing for them and their families, and the right thing to do is to pass the bill now. Pass a permanent funded bill before Christmas. Now is not the time to send the message to our veterans that we will never forget, but now we've got amnesia. Now we may forget, we may not be there, you just have to wait longer. And now is not the time to send the message that we will do whatever it takes, as long as it takes to combat terrorism, but we're going to do it on the cheap. We're only going to do it for a few years. We're not going to totally fund it. These men and women have cancers. 4,000 of them have been diagnosed with over 70 different kinds of cancers. One veteran of the War on Terror told me he has 3 different kinds of cancer. And the cancers they're having are unique and different from anything that our scientists have seen before. Cancers behind the eye, in the nose, in the lungs, of course. And this program is the largest environmental health program in our country, probably the world. So it's not only saving the lives and helping people, it's tremendously important scientific research that pertains to these heroes and heroines. We have to pass this bill. We have to pass it now. It is the right thing to do. It's now my pleasure to introduce Senator Gillibrand, who is working so hard and leading this fight in the Senate along with Senator Schumer. Thank you so much for your leadership.
Before I speak, we have Paul Rykoff has just arrived. He is the founder and the chief of the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Paul has been a champion for our veterans, for men and women who will die for this country, and it is remarkable that he has taken on this challenge as well. Paul Rykoff.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, ma'am. My apologies for being late. I was on an Amtrak that broke down, which is an issue we could take on with another press conference. But Senator Gillibrand recommended that I lead us in a moment of silence just to remember the folks we lost on 9/11 and also in recognition of the folks that we lost in Paris. So I'd ask you to bow your heads and take a moment of silence, please. Thank you. My name is Paul Rykoff. I'm the CEO and founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. I'm also an Iraq veteran. 14 years ago, I was a first responder. I stood on the pile at Ground Zero and did what I could, like so many others. The folks there didn't consider themselves heroes. They were citizens. They were doing what anybody would do for their brother or sister in harm's way. I never thought on that day that 14 years later I'd have to stand with these people and beg for benefits. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. It's a national shame. And it's important that people understand this is not just a New York issue. We have thousands of members all around the country. After I left responding at Ground Zero, I lived in Georgia for a while at Fort Benning. Like many other veterans, I've traveled to other places. So this is absolutely a national issue. It's an imperative. It's a national security imperative. It's equally ironic that we sit here now a few days after Paris had their 9/11 to take care of the folks who responded to ours. What kind of message does it send to America if folks like this have to stand up in front of Congress and beg for health care support? If they step up and put their lives on the line and have to beg for health care a decade later, what does that say to someone when an attack happens down the line here? There's right now a threat attack in Washington, D.C. And if something happens right now, these are the folks who are going to run into the fire. They are the ones who are going to run in to help people. And we can't leave them behind. This is an issue for every generation of veteran. It's an issue for our military, and it's an issue for our entire country. I have a 3-month-old son, and we live in Battery Park City, just blocks away from Ground Zero. I never thought that I would live there, but that community has risen, and it's come back, and it's shown what our country can do after tremendous tragedy. And I'm proud to live there now with my family. But I also want to look at my son and be able to tell him that I'm going to be taken care of. And that's what our country owes all these heroes that stepped up when their country needed them. This is a no-brainer. It's bipartisan. It needs to happen immediately. And everybody in America has been outraged. Now it's time for everybody in America to get focused, get to work, and stand behind these heroes. This is about the soul of our country. And we are a country at war. Now we know everywhere. And we must take care of the people who have the courage, the tenacity, and the leadership to step up when our country needs them. On behalf of IAVA members around the country and around the world, some of whom are serving right now in Iraq and Afghanistan, we are proud to join this fight, and we want to help lead this fight on behalf of all the veterans organizations that are here today. I know the American Legion is here, the VVA is here, the Warrant Office Association, all the other brothers and sisters we have from across the veterans community. Many of our members are also firemen and cops. These are people who make a lifetime commitment to serve, and we must stand with them now. We must pass this extension immediately. We're honored to be here, and more importantly, we're ready to get to work. So we're going to be on the Hill all day today. We're going to be on the Hill as long as we need to until this gets done. It's one team, one fight, and we're going to keep fighting until we get it done. Thank you very much to all the leadership that's here. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I have to do mine.
Oh, yeah,
I
please.
I think Paul said it right, as did John Thiel. None of you should have to be here today. Not one of you. Not one of you should have to come to Washington and ask Congress to do the right thing. Not one of you should have to walk the halls of Congress and ask senator by senator, House member by House member to do the right thing. But there's a truism in Washington, and it is that nothing ever happens here unless regular people stand up and demand it. And that's what each one of you are doing today. You are demanding action from leaders who say they care about this country, who say they care about you, who are grateful for your service. How many times have you heard, "Thank you for your service"? Every day you hear it. Well, this is how you say thank you. You say thank you by being here in the time of need with the basic health care that you desperately need to survive. I can't thank the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans enough for adding us to your fight, to storming this Hill on our behalf. It makes such a difference because we do owe you and every 9/11 hero a debt of gratitude. It's been 14 years, 2 months, and 6 days since the terror attacks on September 11. And all that time, the death toll from that horrible day has not stopped rising.